Sam crouched beside the overgrown trail, fingers trembling as he brushed aside the thick moss carpeting the forest floor. The soil beneath was damp and smelled of rot like spoiled meat and wet iron. Something sharp pricked his palm. He recoiled, then reached again, slower. His fingers closed around leather decayed, soft, cold as a corpse. He pulled gently. The object gave with a sucking squelch, tearing free from the earth like it had lungs of its own. It was a child's satchel. The belt used as a strap was crusted with something brown-red and brittle. Inside, strung like a grotesque necklace, were human teeth, teeny, yellowed. Each one pierced to the root as if worn like trophies. As he stared, the forest creaked, not the usual wind-whipped groans, but slow, deliberate shifts, like something ancient had stirred beneath the roots. A sudden copper temps filled Sam's mouth. He gagged. The air was thick with decay, and the world tilted. Just for a moment, he saw it visions not his own. Children running through these woods, laughter, then screams, firelight, chanting in a tongue that didn't belong to this land. He saw masks, antlers, blood pouring over bark like wine. A ritual, a sealing, came into failure. He dropped the satchel, wiping his hand on his jeans, but the slick residue clung to his skin. Trees leaned closer now. He felt the ties on him. Whispering followed. Not words, just the shape of them brushing against the back of his mind like spider legs. Then, silence. Clear, empty. Sam let out a breath, laughed nervously. Maybe it was just a prank, a local legend meant to scare hikers. That's when he noticed the tree behind him. Fresh carvings in its trunk letters spelling his full name, still bleeding. And beneath it, the bark pulsed. Asterisk. Sam trudged deeper into North Ridge Forest, his boots sinking into wet soil with every step. The air felt colder here, dense and metallic. It clung to his skin like a damp shroud. The deeper he went, the quieter it became. No birds, no insects. Just a rhythmic creak of trees swaying ever so slightly, though there was no wind. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive, intentional. He tried to shake the growing unease. After all, this trip was supposed to be therapeutic, okay? His therapist had suggested isolation, creativity, disconnection. So he brought his sketch pad, his old camping gear, and his stubborn belief that he could outrun the shadow of the divorce. But the forest didn't want him to feel alone. It wanted him to feel watched. As he set up camp, a gust of wind carried the scent of something sweet, cloying like overripe fruit, mixed with the unmistakable sting of copper. Hit the back of his throat. He coughed, tasted bile. His eyes watered. He turned away and saw a strange bundle tangled in the roots of a nearby tree. A child's toy, hand-carved, wooden, soaked in something black and flaking. As he reached for it, the bark shifted, just slightly, as if drawing a breath. That night, Sam lit a small fire and flipped through a weathered guidebook he'd picked up at the local general store. Tucked inside was a hand-scrawled note on yellowed paper. If the trees stop whispering, you're already inside it. Keep moving. Keep doubting. The fire cracked. The silence returned. But just before sleep, the forest exhaled again, a long, low moan from the treetops that vibrated in his bones. He sat up, carved into the inside of his tent flap, in fresh red slashes, was a word he didn't recognize. It pulsed like a heartbeat, okay? And it was still wet. Asterisk. At first, it was easy to dismiss. Trees shift, wood creaks, forests breathe, okay? That's what Sam kept telling himself as he packed up camp the next morning, trying to ignore how the tent flap still bled faintly at the edges where that word had appeared, now dry, but the fabric beneath felt warm, almost feverish. The sky overhead was gray and flat, a smothering lid. For a moment, the air felt still, calm, almost peaceful. But then came the whispers. They slithered through the underbrush, soft, high-pitched, unintelligible. First, Sam thought it was wind catching in the trees. Then he realized they were coming from the soil itself, seeping upward like steam. Each footstep released faint murmurs beneath his boots. The ground was cold, damp, and pulsing faintly like it had a heartbeat. The smell returned stronger this time. Wet copper, decay. Every breath tasted metallic, like he'd bitten his tongue. He swallowed and tasted blood. He bit the inside of his cheek, just to be sure. It tasted different, sharper. Wrong. He pressed forward anyway. Hours passed, or maybe minutes' time began to unravel. Trees repeated themselves, crooked birch with a triple knot, a split pine with a hollow trunk. He saw them more than once. Then came a clearing, and for a heartbeat, hope, sunlight broke through. Birds, CHIRPED. Relief surged in his chest. He dropped to his knees, laughing shakily. It was over. Nerves, maybe sleep deprivation. He drank from his canteen, then silence again. He turned. The clearing was gone. Trees stood tight behind him, as if the forest had swallowed its opening hole. And on the ground where he had just knelt, carved into the soft dirt, were hundreds of tiny handprints, one facing upward, each one twitching. Sam stumbled into a forgotten hunting shack, hidden deep in the forest. Store hung open, creaking slowly like a pendulum with no wind to move it. Inside, dust danced through narrow beams of sickly light. The walls were rotted pine, soaked dark with something that smelled wrong, a mixture of wet leaves, old meat, and copper. Each board seemed to breathe beneath his touch, pulsing cold and damp like stretched skin over bone. On a splintered table lay an old notebook, its pages stuck together with a brown, crusted glue. The handwriting was jagged and frantic. A journal. Sam flipped through it carefully, trying to ignore how the wood beneath his fingers felt sticky alive. The entries were dated decades ago. The last one was unfinished, the ink trailing off mid-sentence. The ritual failed. We thought the salt lines would bind it. We thought the screaming would stop. But it only waits now. It listens. It grows hungry when you fear it. Sam blinked. His head throbbed. The room tilted sideways for a moment, then righted itself. The smell hit him again stronger this time. He doubled over and vomited into the corner. The bile burned, metallic and hot, and when he wiped his mouth, there was blood on his sleeve. He found a map scrawled on the back of the journal. Symbols dotted the forest like wounds. A place marked mountain. Another, offering tree. He didn't know what it meant, but he had to find out. A creak echoed behind him. He spun. The doorway was empty. For a moment, silence returned. He almost breathed again. Then the walls began to weep dark, syrupy trails running down in rivulets, smelling of decay. They formed a word in the wood grain. Listen. And then something knocked from beneath the floor. Sam fled the shack. The forest had darkened somehow, though it was barely midday. Everything was cast in bruised shadows. Branches reached low and gnarled, brushing his shoulders like fingers testing his skin. Every step crackled too loud. Every breath tasted like metal scraped off rusted nails. He stumbled until the trees parted into a hollow, where the air turned strangely warm. Still, too still. There, at the center, hung something that looked like a scarecrow stitched from animal bones and wrapped in children's clothing. Long, faded. A burlap mask covered his face, smeared in dried blood. Sam froze. Then it twitched. A soft voice came from behind him. Childlike, mournful. It only screams when it's hunting. He turned, heart slamming against his ribs. No one was there. The scarecrow shuddered again. Slowly, its head tilted. The burlap split at the seam. Inside was nothing, only blackness. Endless and roiling. From it came a voice, not spoken, but felt deep in his bones. You hear us now? A vision hit him like a seizure. The trees flashing in reverse. A village long dead. People dragging bodies wrapped in white to the forest's edge. Ritual fires, chants in a forgotten tongue. The entity rising anyway, devouring the priests first. The screaming that never stopped. He collapsed, retching. His blood poured from his nose, tasting of rot and heat. The soil beneath him pulsed against, lick, and alive. A hand reached from the dirt. Small, skeletal. It gripped his ankle softly, not pulling, pleading, and then silence. The forest cleared. Scarecrow was gone. Sam crawled to his feet, shaking. Maybe it was a vision, a breakdown. He laughed out, brittle. Then he looked down. That child's handprint was burned into his ankle deep, red and smoking. Sam stumbled back into the forest, mind spinning like leaves in a gale. The child's handprint on his ankle throbbed with heat, sending sharp pulses up his spine. His breath stuttered. The air had changed. The usual forest sounds were gone. No birds, no wind, just the faint, wet drip echoing from somewhere nearby. Smelled like copper and rotting leaf stick, choking. He followed the sound, drawn like a sleepwalker, until he found a mound of moss-covered stones. At first, he thought it was an overgrown root cellar, till he noticed the bones. Tiny ones, dozens, arranged in patterns, circles, spirals, and runes, carved in something too dark to be old blood, something still wet. The stones bled from their cracks, black sludge that hissed where it touched the earth. He gagged, bile rising again. His tongue went numb, metallic, like he'd licked rusted. Knives. Among the bones lay a rusted tin box. Inside, photographs, seepite, children, villagers, some blindfolded, some smiling, unaware. Others were bound to trees, burn marks across their skin. And a note: we offered what we could, but the forest never forgets. It only screams when it's hunting. Sam's vision swam. Low hum began, almost inaudible at first, then whispers, in a language he didn't know, but somehow understood. They repeated the same phrase. One was spared, one remains. The moss around the mound shifted, moved, breathed. He backed away, mind unraveling. He saw flashes rituals with blood-soaked bark, priestess with their mouths sewn shut, the ground drinking the screams of children. They thought the offerings would satisfy it, that it was a god, not a wound in the earth. The mound split open with a wet crack. Inside, a crib, and something still breathing within it. Something that began to cry. Sam's fingers trembled as he reached for the crib, a brittle whimper echoing from within. The wood felt slick beneath his touch raw, as if soaked in something that refused to dry. When he brushed aside the mold-stiff blanket, there was no child, only a bundle of flesh-colored wax, limbs twisted, a face carved to resemble a crying baby, mouth wide, eyes gouged out. Then it screamed, not with lungs, but with the forest. Trees groaned, roots cracked. Bark split open to reveal eyes, dozens of them blinking wetly. Watching Sam stumbled backward, blood roaring in his ears. His mouth filled with the taste of bile and copper. Every breath seared his throat like smoke. The ground pulsed beneath his boots, hot, wet, alive. Memories that weren't his flooded his mind. The original settlers, a harvest gone bad, a girl buried alive to appease the green one. But she hadn't died. Not really. The roots fed on her, preserved her, twisted her into something else. The villagers built charms, carved symbols, wrapped offerings in cloth, and whispered the rites. It bought them time, but never freedom. The forest's hunger outlasted generations until they vanished, all of them gone without a trace. Sam screamed and threw the crib, shattered, splattering black fluid across the stone. He ran, through trees that leaned too close, over roots that tripped him like hands. Finally, silence, clearing. He collapsed, sobbing. The sunlight peeked through. A breeze touched his cheek. For a moment, a real moment, it was gone. He could breathe, think. He even laughed. Then he saw them dot the same photos from the tin box nailed to the surrounding trees. But now, his face had been added, right in the center. Smiling, smiling wide, and beneath it, scribbled in something fresh. One was spared, one remains. Asterisk, the air collapsed in around Sam like a vacuum. The forest no longer whispered, howled. Leaves shrieked. Branches snapped like bones. The trees bent and twisted unnaturally, forming a circle around him. Bark peeled away like skin, revealing throbbing vanny wood beneath. From it oozed a thick black sap that reeked of burned hair and bile. It dripped in steady beats, like the ticking of a grotesque clock. Sam clutched his head. His thoughts weren't his anymore. They were ancient, flooded with chants and forgotten tongues. He saw her again, the girl from the roots, buried alive in the belly of the forest, betrayed by her own blood. It's turned into something holy and horrible. The green one, the child of screams. She had no face, now only an open mouth, always screaming, swallowing light and sound. The photos on the trees began to twitch. The faces blinked, smiled wider. Some cried, his included. He screamed and turned, but the clearing was gone. Trees closed in, gnarled fingers grasping at his arms. One brushed his cheek. It was warm, pulsing, and the bark peeled to reveal tiny teeth. He wrenched away, stumbled into a hollow trunk that pulsed like a heartbeat. Inside, there were bones, recent ones, a phone. The diary pages stuck together with something too red to be ink. We tried to burn the mound, it read. We tried salt, prayer, even her name. Nothing stops her, because she's not cursed. She's the curse itself. Sam laughed, short, broken barks, mind frayed like old rope. Then came silence. ColdClean.com. He stepped into it, trembling. No trees moved, no whispers, just wind and sky. Hope clawed its way up his chest, until the sky opened and screamed with her voice. And Sam realized the force was no longer around him. It was inside him. Sam stumbled through the forest, but it no longer felt like woods. The ground pulsed beneath his boots, soft and spongy like rotted flesh. Roots snaked up around his ankles, slick with sap that smelled of copper and wet decay. His tongue was thick. Every breath tasted like iron blood and bile. He gagged, spitting something black that writhed briefly before sinking into the moss. He collapsed near an old boundary stone covered in carvings. Symbols meant to ward off evil, drawn in ash and goat blood, cracked and faded now. The elders of the village had placed them generations ago in effort to contain her. Stories told of a girl sacrificed during a famine, screams echoing so loud they tore open the skin between worlds. They buried her in a cradle of roots, sealed with salt, sealed with silence. But the silence didn't last. The carvings in the stone glowed faintly. A flicker of hope sparked in Sam. He pressed his hand to them, chanting the broken lines from the diary. Nothing happened. Then the wind stilled. The air thickened like oil. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. No voices, no blood dripping from bark, no trees shifting in the corner of his eyes. Maybe it was over. A creak, then another. The stone split down the center. Something wet and fingered slithered out. Sam screamed, but it was hoarse, weak like the wind, being strangled. The trees bent toward him, hungrily. In his mind, he saw visions like him, lost in this place, devoured by their own guilt. Fed on guilt, on broken minds, on hope that the earth opened beneath him, cold, slimy, screaming, and just before he vanished into the soil's gaping maw, he heard his own voice echo above. She's not hunting anymore. She's home. Weeks passed. The forest remained. Authorities claimed Sam had simply vanished, another hiker lost in a dark tangle of pines and gnarled roots. But the locals knew better. They avoided the eastern trail now, especially at dusk, whispering old superstitions passed down like scarred heirlooms. Children were taught not to listen to the wind, not to follow the echoes that sounded like someone they knew, and, above all, never to respond when the forest screamed. But it did. Louder now. Hunters reported oddity streets leaking sap, the color of blood. Stones rearranging themselves overnight into spirals and runes. One man found a tooth lodged in his cabin door, still wet with spit. Another swore he tasted bile in the river water. All dismissed publicly, of course. No one wanted to sound crazy, but they heard its soft whispers under their floorboards. Gentle creaking in the walls, like something pacing on all fours, just beneath the skin of their homes. Then came the boy, 10 years old, curious, brave. He wandered too far and returned, with eyes too wide, his mouth stained red. Said he found a lullaby in the trees. Said she sings now, not just screams. In his hands, he clutched a piece of torn flannel Sam's shirt, crusted in dirt. Something else. The village priest tried to bless it. The altar cracked at night. Parents began finding dirt trails leading to their children's beds. Wet footprints on the ceiling, whispers under the floor that mimicked voices of the dead. The walls wept in the schoolhouse. Dogs howled at roots, crawling through concrete. They burned the boys' shoes. They prayed in circles. Still, the forest edged closer, and from beneath the soil came the faintest sound. Not a scream, a giggle,